Tune in today at 11 a.m. on episode 23 as Politically Conscious welcomes Dr. Cher'Don Reynolds, fresh off her CNN appearance, to break down how President Trump's tariff hikes are hitting small businesses like hers that rely on imports from China and beyond. We also dive into claims of insider trading in Congress or politicians like Nancy Pelosi cashing in while everyday Americans ride out market chaos. If you're tired of the propaganda, listen to us. What's up, everybody? It's your boy Montoya Smith, aka Black Socrates. I am your mental activist, and this is episode 23 of Politically Conscious. Got my ride or die Emil Bryan here, expert political consultant. As I always say, I put him on the left. He claims independent, but he's left leaning like hell. As I'm buying a little time trying to get our guest on, as we highlighted just now, we're featuring a special guest. We don't often bring guests on Politically Conscious, but to just kind of set the show up for anybody that is a first-time watcher, if you will. We are live on YouTube, live on Facebook. We like to basically visit political clips around the web and give our take from the left, right? And I'm being the true independent versus Emil, give you that perspective. And so that's kind of our niche, if you will. I hope I'm saying that correctly. But Emil, if you will, give a little bit of your background before we get our special guest on. I'm going to play a cut to bring her in as soon as you give them your background. So if you will, go ahead and let them know who you are, brother.
Emil Bryan, I am a political consultant. I'm also a writer and a speaker. My job is to tell the truth. And I ask all of the political candidates that consult with me to tell the truth. The people can handle it. You have to give them good news or bad news on time. Bad news never gets better with time. Mostly what we're trying to do is give people enough information to make good decisions and then motivate them to get to the polls to actually cement that decision. So that's what I do, and I love doing it. It's all about helping people be better so that the people have the best choices at the polling booth.
Now, I love it. So without further ado, we're going to introduce our special guest, Dr. Cher'Don Reynolds. We're going to play a little clip and then bring that sister on fresh off her CNN visit based on some comments that went viral of her talking about tariffs as a small business owner. But let's play this cut before we introduce her.
Hey guys, Cher'Don here, the CEO of She Prints It. Last week, I was interviewed by Atlanta News First about the tariff rollout and how it's going to impact my business. I was happy to share, but was surprised when I came to the office this morning and experienced this.
I'd like to let Ms. Reynolds know that our company will no longer be spending all the money that we spend with her as She Prints It on anything because of what she said with the news. And by the way, if she's complaining about tariffs because China went up on tariffs 24%, she should be buying from American people. We want American-made products. We don't pay more for American-made products. But we're not buying anything for you because she's trying to make the greatest president ever lived good. For those.
Listen, sir, you and your minion friends can call and make all the threats you want, but you will never instill fear in this little black girl's heart, because I will always speak truth to power, and I will not do it afraid. You will not back me into a corner. You will not stop me from saying that the truth is America is made off the backs of small businesses, that we employ the majority of Americans, that we are the reason for the economy, that we show up for our communities when nobody else does. I know how important and impactful small businesses are, and I will fight till the end. Will never silence me and my voice. If I lose my business, so be it. I will never lose my voice to you or anybody else. I care more about the people than one single person, because that's true patriotism.
And we are fortunate enough to have this beautiful sister on with us after ringing a flag for true patriotism, as she says. But thank you, Queen, as I always say, Dr. Cher'Don Reynolds. Thank you, Queen, for being with us. You've definitely, probably didn't expect this whirlwind. Again, as I said, as I like to highlight, fresh off your CNN visit, because I'm pretty sure you didn't know that your take here in Atlanta would get you on CNN talking about small business. But I love to highlight that she is a Mental Dialogue member, as you see in the background. So thank you, Queen, for being a longtime member in that sense. Emil is a member as well. But with that said, Queen, I wanted to highlight, we were hoping to have Shelly on, but he's tied up right now. And I wanted to introduce the fact that one of your biggest opportunities came with our other co-host, Shelly Winters, who's unable to be here. But I'll let you highlight that and just kind of say hello to everyone. And I'm very curious as what Emil has to say about seeing that cut, because he didn't know what we were introducing. I just told him I was bringing on a special guest. He doesn't know anything about you. So say what you want to say, and then I want to hear what Emil has to say to that cut before we even dig into your actual issue with the tariffs.
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, thank you so much for always sharing your platform, for always giving voice to people who seem to feel voiceless in some cases, right? I think about how, yes, I'm grateful to be on platforms like CNN now, and that people are hearing my concerns on a national level, but it has always started with me being able to be featured on Mental Dialogue and within your community. So I appreciate you for that. And to that point, when I first started my business 8 years ago, it was at a Mental Dialogue event that I met Shelly, and he was working with Wind Down Wednesdays that they used to host in the city of Atlanta over, I forget the park. I think it's
Piedmont Park, maybe, or
Piedmont Park, maybe, yes.
It is one of
And it was my first opportunity, like really showing up at a larger event. And it was because he saw us. We mentioned that we were interested in doing something. He talked about a need he had. And that's what happens at Mental Dialogue, that we all get to share what our desires are, our dreams, our needs, our wants. And there's usually always somebody in the room to help us bring that vision to life. So thank you.
Absolutely. So let's get right into this politically conscious episode 23. Emil, what did you capture? Because again, you didn't know I was introducing you. When you heard that cut I just played, just what stood out to you, and then we're going to share what she actually said here in Atlanta that got her on CNN as well. But what
respect is what I heard. I heard the voice of the ancestors. I heard somebody who's steeped in her history and culture. I heard somebody who cares deeply about the people that she affects, whether it's in her family or in her community. I heard somebody who cares about the American worker, and I heard somebody who cares deeply about how she does business, not only if she does business. And I see a lot of people in this part of our history, this epoch of our history, who are choosing to chase dollars instead of principles. And respect to Dr. Reynolds, because she's chasing a principle. She said, I will be a voice, and if I lose my business, so be it, but I will never lose my voice. And this woman is immune to, what is it called when you lose your voice? Laryngitis? She's immune to political laryngitis. And that's what I'm talking about. That's what's up.
Yeah, she won't ever get that. If she ever got it, we still gonna hear her. That's how I'm just keeping it a bean with y'all. That's the inside track on Dr. Reynolds. But with that said, man, thank you for that response. I'm gonna share the screen. You know, I'm not as great at that to share what really, in a sense, prompted her into national prominence around this conversation. Because here's one thing I'll say that's a little unique in this sense. As much as we push going into business, specifically even in our community, or really just all communities, as much as Americans understand that businesses are something that people want to go into, the reality is I always like to put things in context. She knows that's my thing. Mm-hmm. So in all reality, as much as we push people into context, into business, I'm sorry, only 16 to 20% of Americans even have a business, even on the side, if you will. At the end of the day, the other 80% of us are working for business owners, if you will, and only 11% do it full time like her. So it's just kind of, again, as much as you see that on the social media to go into business, and I do applaud people for going into business, but at the end of the day, it's a unique and different skill set. And small businesses are, as you will hear her say, is the backbone of America. The government knows that, but I don't know if we as the people always understand how significant that role is. And so as much as we have talked about tariffs on this show in the past, the reality is we never really think about it, in my opinion, from the small business owner impact, who has a bigger impact than us just saying, are my prices going to be higher on the shelf as an individual citizen? So I just wanted to give that context, and let me share the screen and again, show y'all what prompted her into national prominence with this. So share screen. It's not right there. I normally try to put these cuts on here so I don't have to go through this, but I couldn't put this cut on there, so I had to share it. All right, give me 1 second. Oh man, I used to be quicker at this. I got better at this last time I did it, Emil, didn't I?
You were. You had it. I don't know what happened, but
here it is.
no, patient. We know
I lost the button. I found the button. Here we go. So let's go. Wrong one. All right, here we go. Thank y'all for bearing with me. Can y'all see the screen? Tell me if you can see the screen.
See it.
All right, let me see if I can make this big and play it.
The Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce tells us nobody in Atlanta wins a trade war, and just overnight, some small business owners here in Atlanta tell us they're already feeling the financial pain from these tariffs. She Prints It owner, Dr. Cher'Don Reynolds, shared with me this email from a distributor they use from China with the subject, "Key policy changes effective immediately." This came to her inbox after President Trump issued the 54% tariffs on Chinese goods. Reynolds will now have to pay more for shipping, and an $800 duty-free threshold was eliminated. Reynolds said she will have to pay these costs to her customers, and these tariffs hit beyond her business.
It's like a domino effect that all of this may be wiped away over something as simple as a unnecessary argument about goods and tariffs and trade that really impacts the everyday people. It breaks my heart.
And how are these?
And so let me read some of her words as well, real quick, and then we'll let you jump in. She went on to say, and this is just what they wrote from this broadcast. They highlighted this. She said, "It's just heartbreaking, and we need our leaders to fight for us. We need the lawmakers to demand something different happens. They know for a fact that we cannot survive this, and they don't care. But I'm not going out without a fight." With this, she also says this. Reynolds shared with Atlanta News first message she received from her Chinese distributors. They just showed that. General said with 54% tariffs imposed on Chinese goods, her business will struggle to keep up with the fees, and she'll have to pass the cost down to her customers. It's a domino effect that we all may be wiped away over something as simple as an unnecessary argument about goods and tariffs and trade that really impacts everyday people. It breaks my heart, which is what she just said in the She says, "We cannot sustain a 2-year wait. Small businesses make up 99.6% of all Georgia businesses, according to the U.S. Small Business Association. The Small Business Association identifies small businesses as those with fewer than 500 employees. And roughly 42% of Georgia employees work for small businesses." So I think that's a lot of context that just really breaks down. But that's what, in a sense, got Dr. Reynolds on CNN. Emil, I'm going to let you respond again, just because we're introducing her to you. So I'm always curious, and someone who hearing this for the first time, what are your thoughts?
So this is where you will find me to be deep into a radically weird space on tariffs and trade. I believe in the American worker, but I also believe that Dr. Reynolds, as a business owner, has to figure out the best way in the current environment to make a profitable business. So that's two competing things. The problem is, over the last 30 years, the shift from a manufacturing-based economy to a service-based economy means that Dr. Reynolds doesn't have a lot of American options to presented to her that keeps her costs reasonable for her customers. So a lot of customers shop on price. That's normal. That's what we expect them to do. So if she doesn't have an American alternative, especially when she's looking for high quality and lower cost, then she's going to have to look overseas. And one of the main places she looked was a place like China. So now we have this problem. We created a global economy. That was the intent of the North American Free Trade Agreement back in 1992-93. We created this global economy. We made America the center of the global economy. Lots of businesses popped up because we now had access to more goods and services from around the world. By default, that meant that all of our manufacturing shipped overseas. Now, you can blame a lot of business owners for that because they were looking for profits, not people like Dr. Reynolds, but large businesses, large customers. They were looking for greater profits. They got them. But now we're in a trade war. Now, you will not hear it said like that, but that's what it is. And we fired the first shot. America fired the first shot. and it was unnecessary. And she said that very clearly. And this is the part that I really want to emphasize and maybe even echo from what she said. The people who get most injured by these shots are not IBM, AT&T, and Fortune 500s. They're the small business owners, the people whose margins are so small and whose reserves are so short that she doesn't have a lot of runway to get through this turbulence. She's not supposed to have a lot of runway to get through this turbulence. If she's doing her job as a small business owner, then she's trying to keep her costs low so she can keep the price to her customers low, then her margins are going to be enough that she can eke out a little reasonable profit and then keep her clients very happy with high quality and reasonable cost, reasonable prices. When that doesn't happen because of a self-inflicted, unforced error, now she's losing that slim margin, and she's either going to have to pass it to the customer and lose customers, or she's going to dig into her business reserves and eventually fall apart because she can't sustain this new regime. All of this because we created a global economy that for one person, it's not sufficient. We're not making enough money. And if you look at the American economy over the last 35 years, or almost 35 years, it's grown faster than any other major economy on the planet. Developing economies have grown faster than ours, but every major economy on the planet, it's been the gem of growth. There was no reason to inflict this wound upon ourselves, and especially on small business owners like Dr. Reynolds.
So, Dr. Reynolds, you just found out why I got Emil Bryant on this show. So all I got to do is just pass him the rock and just be quiet. As much as I like to talk, I give it to him. You feel me? But yeah, go ahead, Dr. Reynolds. Thank you again for being with us. I love how Emil summed it up outside looking in your situation. But anything you want to add? Again, just thank you for being with us.
Yeah, no, I think you summed it up beautifully, and that's exactly my point. And this is a war, and language does matter. And so I think it's important that we identify that this is war, because there's casualty in war, right? There's people who get caught in the crossfires of war. There are innocent people who lose their lives and their livelihoods in war. And that's exactly what's happening with this tariff war that we're in. And it's not just about China. I think one of the biggest points that I want to make, and I talked about briefly on CNN yesterday, that this is not about China. And this also is not just about me. This is about having to deal with the uncertainty on day to day on someone who is seemingly having a temper tantrum about what he thinks individually is right, not based on data, as you so beautifully shared, how we have grown tremendously over the last 30 plus years, but also to the point that I am open to purchasing in the US. That has never been an issue or something that I think small businesses, we don't like the long waits to deal with somebody from overseas, right? But because of how we attempted to structure our global economy with not enough guardrails, I would say, that we have been forced to source overseas. I think at the start of this goal to have a global economy and increase profit margins in turn, which will allow more small businesses to grow and create jobs and do things for the community, that was well intended. But then it became where you had to be a importer or exporter, where you had to have proof that you were a business, a resale license, to where there's Alibaba, AliExpress. And so any and everybody can buy any and everything. And the same with now from an apparel standpoint, I know fashion designers who are being ripped off by Shein and Temu and all of these things because there were no guardrails, right? So I do support the idea of positioning more guardrails, but also trying to move manufacturing back into the US. But there's a couple problems that we have, first and foremost. The first thing is that we don't have manufacturing here. So 90 somewhere between 92 to 96% of apparel and shoes that are imported into the US to sell are from other countries. Okay. So although your Nikes or your Adidas or whatever, your favorite clothing brand, now even the luxury handbags, right? We're finding the bulk of the manufacturing happened in China, and then they transitioned it to Italy. But either way, it's not the US, right? So the majority of things are not even manufactured here. We don't have the capacity to make such a shift so fast and make a difference in the community. Second is the cost of living. So in order for us to then shift everything to be US made, or for me to say, hey, I need to make sure these goods are produced in the US, I need to pay, and for people to pay the rate that it's going to cost, we have to start paying people a more than just a livable wage. And the fact that the federal minimum wage is still $7.25 or something to that point, nobody can survive off of that. Not a one person, right? Nowhere in the world, there's not the smallest rural town that somebody can survive off $7.25. So if you want me to now transition from selling a coffee mug for $10 to, because it's made in the US, that I have to sell it for $21 per unit, people need to make enough money to afford to spend that extra luxury, make those luxury purchases, because they're not necessities, right? And so clothing, all the biggest booming retail markets, they're things that they're wants, they're not needs in most cases, but you have to have the money to fund it. And so if we're not talking about making sure that there's some manufacturing whether you give some subsidizing to small businesses in the interim as we're doing this transition, right? Instead of making huge tax cuts for the rich, make some subsidies and create some type of subsidized expenses or costs or payouts to small businesses, so that we can continue to employ 46% of America as we're making this transition. But then you also have to change what is the cost of living. Like, we have to increase wages so people can afford to purchase things from the US. So the argument is like China, but again, these major handbags are coming out of Italy. It's not being manufactured in the US, period, whether it's China or anywhere else. And if we're demanding things be made in the US, we have to have the infrastructure for it. In the midst of building the infrastructure that's easily going to take somewhere between 5 to 10 years to do, we have to have some type of subsidies for small businesses so that they don't go under in the interim. And we have to have a plan to pay people more than livable wage so they can afford US made goods. And until all of those points are talked about collectively, we are in no position to go into a tariff war with anyone, especially China, because we get way more from them, 3 times the amount than they purchase from us. So I'll just say, just quickly in closing, I saw that, or not, to end my point, is that also we got to stop picking and choosing who deserves to be helped. I see that he's put a pause on tariffs coming from certain places, and now he's putting a pause, so to speak, on the deportation to help restaurants and farmers. Well, 90+ % of farmers are white. So you can't keep jumping in to save people who look like you and leave the rest of us to figure it out. And I think that's what's happening, and that's a deeper conversation that people aren't willing to have.
Well, we're willing to have it on Politically Conscious. I'm glad you said it. And I'll highlight, I'm going to play another cut. I actually hadn't planned for this cut, but I pulled it because I think it's just putting in perspective a lot of what you just talked about, Cher'Don, when you talk about what it would actually take. And while bring back manufacturing sounds like a gun-ho, something that we want to do in America, the reality of becoming a global society and the fact that we created this global society, as Emil said, with the way we set things up. So it kind of goes against the history from what I understand, but I'm going to play this cut from John Hope Bryant, and I'll just be interested in hearing what both of you have to say about it. So let me play this cut real quick.
70% of this economy is consumer spending. 70% of all Americans are living from paycheck to paycheck. If you're making $100,000 a year, 50% of those are living from paycheck to paycheck. You're making $250,000 a year, a quarter of those are living from paycheck to paycheck. About 35% of those are living from paycheck to paycheck. You live in Manhattan, you make $100,000, it feels like $39,000. So that's the starting point. People got too much month at the end of their money. And most folks are living, before this, you know, before all this happened, they were already stretched because of what happened with the pandemic and all the money that flowed in, which triggered inflation, which was very stubborn because it was $6 or $7 trillion flowing to the economy. The jobs that we're talking about were on their way out in the Industrial Revolution. It no longer makes any sense for us to manufacture old line manufacturing in the U.S. It's too expensive. That's why about 25% of our economy is tied to international trade. You can have manufacturing, but it's going to be high-tech manufacturing. Mm-hmm. It's going to be tied to artificial intelligence. You can have manufacturing, you can have a new economy, but you got to train people in artificial intelligence en masse. Financial literacy should be a civil rights issue. AI literacy should be a civil rights issue.
But that's not really, I mean, you know, it's
but that goes.
He's right.
But that goes
right?
to my point of a comprehensive economic strategy to revitalize these cities that are struggling.
There are children that are going to go hungry because their parents can't afford to pay the higher prices on groceries.
So, Emil, I'll start with you. And what it reminds me of one time you highlighted on the show what happened to our country when we decided to go to space. And then there were so many efforts made in what was going to be taught, educated upon, because it was all built around, we're going to need this type of student, this type of engineer to even pull off going to space. That goal led to elevation in education. So when I hear John Hope Bryant lay that out, you hear the brother say that's a more comprehensive approach. I don't think that, in my opinion, that's the leadership that we're hearing. If somehow that's the goal, in my opinion, bringing back manufacturing sounds like it's going against what we even set up. But go ahead, Emil.
So let me go back before I go forward. The Department of Labor has a calculator called the CPI, Consumer Price Index Calculator. I encourage our listeners to go to it and play with the numbers. Here's why this is important. Dr. Reynolds said that the minimum wage is $7.25. That changed in 2009. Right? So in the last 16 years, what has happened to prices? So you go to the CPI calculator on the Department of Labor website, and you can find out that $100 in 2009, to have a spending power of $100 from 2009, you have to make $151 today. That is a 50% change in the value of the dollar. So what you would hope is that the minimum wage would keep up with that, so that if you were making $7.25 an hour and you could live, I won't say live well, but I'll say live, then you should be making around $10 an hour now by the federal minimum wage. You're not. You're still at $7.25. That's a very important point, because we were driving out low-cost jobs through globalization. That was the whole point. We wanted to increase the amount of high-tech manufacturing. President Obama actually led a task force where he was trying to institute several centers of excellence around the country. These were centers of excellence for high-tech manufacturing supply chains, high-tech manufacturing engineering, high-tech manufacturing facilities. All of these things were part of a long-term plan that he was trying to institute that would help America go from service-based, from lower cost or lower skill manufacturing to high-tech manufacturing in a controlled way, which would have also included education and labor training. Now we get to someone like John Hope Bryant, who clearly says that we're not going to go back to the kind of lower skill manufacturing that we saw in the early 20th century. We're going to go to a high-tech manufacturing base. But in order to do that, you have to have a high-tech manufacturing workforce. That means people who are educated and flexible and creative and agile, and who understand how to integrate their skill sets into these new manufacturing lines. This is going to take a completely different type of education than what we saw in the 20th century. But in order to do all of that, you have to have a national consensus led by the president that says, this is our moonshot. 1968 or 1961, President Kennedy said, we choose to go to the moon, not because it's easy, but because it's hard. So he put in front of America a very difficult task and then said, let's figure out how we're going to get there together. What this president has not done is say, we're going to do something incredibly hard. We're going to pull all the high-tech manufacturing back to America, and we're going to educate our workforce, and we're going to sustain, and we're going to create the environment where businesses can flourish with that high-tech manufacturing process, workforce, supply chain, environmental regulations, and all of the things necessary. It's going to be a 50-state solution. And it's going to also require Guam, Puerto Rico, Northern Marianas Islands. It's going to require every single bit of America if we're going to pull high-tech manufacturing into this nation and overcome the deficit created by globalization. That deficit was intentional. And we have to be very careful about how we're trying to talk about this understanding. It wasn't an accident. China didn't come to America and say, stick them up, give me your jobs.
Right.
It was a very intentional process. And the problem was the American worker was left out. You've heard me say this before, but I'm going to repeat it now because it's important. The American worker was left out. There weren't the kind of training and education efforts that gave the American worker the ability to integrate into what is now needed, which is a high-tech manufacturing base.
Great stuff, Emil. Dr. Reynolds, if you will, I know I want to get you back to your work. I know you're out here trying to survive the tariff war right now, so we can't keep you away too long. So
no, this is good. I'm happy to be here.
No, absolutely. But Jay, if you will, give me a final thought, and we're going to jump into some other political things. If you want to stay with us, I don't mind, but I definitely want to close out this conversation. And thank you for just giving us that small business perspective that I think is so needed for people to have versus just what's in the news. Again, if you're tired of the propaganda, listen to us. We're just trying to raise political consciousness. And I'll also say to anybody that's watching, if nothing else out of what Emil just broke down, we're talking about the president and what the government can and should be do. The reality stands, this is where the future is going. So you as an individual, if you can get a jump start on getting educated in these areas, that's just something that's going to be an asset for you, kind of despite what happens with our government, and you'll survive it much more so than those who don't make that transition. But any final thought in reference to this particular conversation, Dr. Reynolds, if you want to stay, let me know at the end.
Yeah, for sure. So I would say all of what Emil said is like chef's kiss, like on point. Like there's nothing truly to add. I would offer suggestions on solutions, right? Because we are where we are. As I think you mentioned earlier, here's where we are. And I care about all small businesses because, again, nearly 50% of jobs come from small businesses. And the truth is, those small businesses are the people that you can go to the CEO, right? And say, hey, this is what I got going on in my family. Is there any way you can work with me? You get to see firsthand where your hard work goes, right? How they take that money and put it back into the community. Like myself, we make sure that we do grants for small businesses, that I'm intentional about showing up and sponsoring and supporting other small businesses. Every company that I work with from a 1099 standpoint is another small business, right? So you get to see that firsthand. But I think from a solution standpoint, here's where we are now. And what do we do to band together to make a difference? If you have a warehouse and you're not using 40% of it, find another small business that you can work with and say, hey, I'm going to sublease this portion of my warehouse out to you so that you don't have unnecessary overhead. If you know that you are a master graphic designer and you already work for a corporation, but you can donate 10 hours of your day, find a small business that you can support in this time. If you are thinking about starting a business, I think about hairstylists in the white community. They have Paul Mitchell, right? We all have heard the term Paul Mitchell as a hair salon, and we don't go there, but we heard it because there's so many of them nationwide, but we don't have a Black version of the hair salon that there's that one name we all know. So before you go start another business, find one that's thriving in your community and find out hey, can I open a concept salon with your same name so that we can build our own infrastructures? We have to stop waiting for somebody to give us the right to do what we already know how to do. We have built Black Wall Streets and so many things before that. That's just a hot topic now. But we have been doing this, and it works that way because we operate within community. If you don't have $1 to spend, but I think about in the church, they have the building fund, right? I may not have money to give towards the building fund, but if I'm a carpenter, then I can say, hey, I am going to volunteer 10 hours or I'll work on Wednesdays to build. But even bigger, if the church then said, hey, we need to have a directory of businesses, owners in the church. And if you ever need anything, you need to go to somebody from the church. If you need somebody to help, hey, we're going to collect a fund and we're going to pay this one graphic designer and he's going to help 10 small businesses within the church. That is how we have to move as a community, and stop waiting for somebody and stop being so proud to say I am self-made, or taking so much energy and self gloat into saying I bootstrapped it. That is foolishness. These people up here that's making decisions that are destroying our businesses have never bootstrapped a thing.
Never.
And until we decide that we're going to be a part of not just helping you tie your boots, but bringing you the boot polished and clean, and we're going to help you keep it clean, then we are always going to get caught in the crossfires of somebody's war, some wealthy man's war that they're starting just to make more space, more wealth, and more opportunity for them, because they are always operating in a communal way when it comes to destruction of others. And we know how to build community. We just don't do it in a destructive way, and we shouldn't, but we need to continue to do it in a profitable way. So when they attempt to destroy us, we have the barriers and blocks ready to defend ourselves.
Hey, Queen, that's a drop the mic. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna let this be the last words they hear from you as we continue just another 20 minutes of this show. But thank you so much. Again, glad to bring that small business perspective that I, again, don't think is out here enough. And then as you end it, which is no surprise to me, with several solutions that our watchers hopefully can take and one of those seeds and do something with. So appreciate you for your time today, Queen.
My pleasure. Thank you both. I'll continue to listen in, though. This is
okay,
good.
Sounds good.
All right. Bye, guys.
Cool. So super cool. Let's keep this thing moving. If you just tuned in, we just amazing segment. Great guest for us today.
She was spitting fire, bro.
All day, every day. Absolutely.
Fire.
All right, let's talk about what these Congress people doing while we out here trying to figure out these markets. You feel me?
Meanwhile, Doge may have just found their next target. Elon Musk says he's now focusing on members of Congress who became, quote, strangely wealthy while in Congress.
Breaking news, guys. Elon Musk and the Doge community just locked eyes on Capitol Hill, and the target, strangely wealthy members of Congress who somehow turned six-figure salaries into multi-million-dollar fortunes. And yes, Nancy Pelosi is right in the spotlight.
Of Apple stock, and on the same day, he also sold $5 million worth of artificial intelligence computer chip maker NVIDIA. Stock was 138, so Pelosi sells $5 million worth of stock. Today, less than a month later, it's closed at 118, a 13% drop since Pelosi unloaded. Now, here's where it gets tricky. Apparently, these...
Wow, guys. Wow. We're talking about stock trades that are just so perfectly timed. It's almost like she's got a crystal ball, or maybe even a seat in the back room where the real decisions get made, right? So guys, in this video, we're going to be exposing the trades, the timelines, the massive money moves that Nancy Pelosi and others have made while you were busy paying taxes and trusting the system like we were some suckers, right? Anyway, guys, stay tuned, because later in this video, we're going to be ultimately revealing a single trade in a tiny AI company that's already printing millions of dollars for Nancy Pelosi, and barely anybody's talking about it. Plus, why Elon Musk's latest moves could shake up Congress like never before, and how you can actually track these insider level trades in real time. Don't blink, guys. Don't click away. The hypocrisy, it is just getting started, and the receipts, they're undeniable. If you guys appreciate the content, the updates, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, one or the other or both. Either way, I'm good with it. But, you know, strap in, guys, because what I'm about to share with you guys today, this should have the entire country asking one question. How did Paul and Nancy Pelosi make $38 million in stock trades between Election Day and Inauguration Day? Meanwhile, the rest of us were just kind of sitting around just trying to survive inflation and watch the results. Yeah, you heard that right, guys. $38 million in just a matter of weeks. But it gets worse. Paul Pelosi dumped $24 million in Apple stock and another $5 million in Nvidia stock right before those stocks took a nosedive.
And on the same day, he also sold $5 million worth of artificial intelligence computer chip maker NVIDIA. Stock was 138, so Pelosi sells $5 million worth of stock. Today, less than a month later, it's closed at 118, a 13% drop since Pelosi unloaded. Now, here's where it gets tricky. Apparently, the stock trading prowess of the Pelosi family is so widely known that there is an X account called the Nancy Pelosi Stock Track.
So not only did she beat the drop, but she sparked a trend. So her trades are tracked by nearly 1 million people now, people literally following her every move and profiting off of it. But this isn't just about making money, guys. This is about power. Think about it. Because when you zoom out and you line up those dates, those trades, they happen right around big government transactions, sensitive meetings, and behind the scenes chatter. It's kind of like they got a cheat code for the stock market, right? I mean, what else could it be?
Says he's now.
Emil, and the thing is, that's an old cut because the very same thing happened just recently, just last week, with the drop and the rise that happened just a week ago. Some of the Congress people took specific advantage of it again. That's actually an old cut. If you recall, I had hoped to get to those cuts a couple of shows ago. So it's what you just saw is still happening. And I saw a headline, I didn't get to read into it, that said Nancy Pelosi defends insider trading. I'm pretty sure that's hyperbole because I didn't read the article. But at the same time, how else are we as the citizens, how else are we left to look at this while we're trying to figure out all of this market chaos? How else can we look at this?
So you have a bunch of stuff happening at the same time. And I kind of want to walk through like 2 or 3 of them very briefly, but very succinctly. First of all, insider trading is wrong on all counts. So we got to be very clear what's happening. What's happening is the companies and the industries, and this is very important, the industries that Congress oversees in all of its committees and subcommittees before they actually vote on something, all of the hearings that they do, they're getting tons and tons of information before the public gets that information. So that informs how they can move. There's something called the Stock Act, or stock trading. Let me see if I can look it up real quick because I had to look it up. I wanted to make sure I got it right. The Stock Trading on Congressional Knowledge Act of 2012, right? The Stock Act was supposed to slow down, curb a lot of these potential abuses where Congress in its capacity to oversee parts of the economy, parts of the government, and parts of the nation to stop congressmen from trading. This is back in 2012. That law was signed by Barack Obama. It was amended in 2013 to make it easier or harder, depending on your perspective, for Congress to trade stocks. So that didn't stop it. So in the last Congress, Republican Representative Zachary Nunn, introduced another law that's just like, we'll ban it altogether. You cannot trade stock if you're in Congress. The president, the vice president, and Congress, as well as the Supreme Court, all have these ethics exceptions. We'll call them exceptions that allow them to do the things that you're seeing. So it's legal, but we know it's not right. And this is where we stand. Pelosi is just the most famous example, but it happens on both sides of the aisle. And what you're seeing is that the members of Congress are not putting voluntarily their portfolios into like a blind trust where they don't know what's in it. The person who manages that blind trust could make moves that would be, you know, in fiduciary responsibility. They would be able to say to their to the person that hired them, the congressperson, the representative or senator, hey, I'm making moves that will keep pace with inflation or outpace inflation, but they would never know what those moves were. If we do not have people putting their information, their stock and portfolios into a blind trust, there runs this risk that the oversight process that they use will give them information that they cannot trade on. And that information is very clear. How good is this information? Let me show you a quick example from last week. The president, 3 hours before he announced that he was going to put a 90-day pause on tariffs, also tweeted, "It's a great time to buy." Now, come on, man. We can see you. It's not that hard for us to make the leap. He says it at 9:30, and around 12:30 that same day, he puts a pause on stocks. If you had traded on some of that information, you could have, and there were options portfolios. Let's just say some people were making a bet. Those bets came back at 2,100% rises in one day. That's 20x money in one day, simply by trading on this information. The president knew what he was going to do, and he used wink, wink. Now is a good time to buy. And everybody who bought or magnified their trading capacity by using options and other things like that, margins, they were able to magnify their gains from maybe the large swing that was in the market to some outsized gains up to 2,000%. This is why this is so important, because you and me, we don't get that information until after it's publicly released. And then we trade on that information, and we're lemmings, we're sheep, we're the ones following the trends. They're the ones who have the knowledge before these things come to public knowledge. They have information that precedes the public's ability to act on it. And that is a problem. And it needs to stop. And the way we stop it is by bringing people into Congress who are committed to this should not happen anymore.
Let me ask you something, because it concerns me from this standpoint. As part of my biggest reasons for being a political independent, I don't know necessarily the biggest reasons, but one of my biggest concerns is there's not, in my opinion, enough knowledge brought to the concept of Citizens United. You know what I mean? Where corporations can, you know, put as much money into candidates, coffers, if you will, without a limit, because of how Citizens United is set up. And so this, for me, hearing you say this, Emil, makes me think, so if somehow we were able to even reel in Citizens United and get that changed, if that were somehow able to happen in the future, it sounds like to me what's happening, because we've been long talking about how now in the past, being in public capacity on any level, local, definitely local and even state level, but even at the national level, didn't necessarily make you rich. And this is just as of 25 years ago. Right. But in the last 20 years, it sounds like to me that my independent dream is to get rid of Citizens United. If we got rid of it, it sounds like what you're saying now, they still would be sitting so fat that they wouldn't have a concern for us as the citizen. Again, that's just something that I'm surmising out of what you said. What do you think about my concerns in that sense, since you can now individually walk away from Congress extremely wealthy, not just okay, but wealthy?
So you have so many things happening at the same time with that concept. So Citizens United was a ruling that the Supreme Court made that said basically a company can give as much money as it wants to, as long as it's not directly to the candidate. So they go through what's called a super PAC, or a super political action committee. The super PAC can spend money on issues, but it can't coordinate with the candidate. So if you see a super PAC coordinated with a candidate, that would be outright illegal. If, however, they take public cues, right, a speech, let's say, and they follow whatever that speech says, there's no law broken. So they can't coordinate, but they can follow. So it becomes real funky. What we don't know about just the regular political action committee and the money that the candidate earns is the money that the candidate earns can be used in multiple ways. Let's say, for instance, a president has lots of legal fees. he can fundraise on those legal fees and keep that money and use it for his campaign or his legal fees or to pay his mistress. And all of that would be, relatively speaking, legal. So we have a problem that Citizens United opened the door to money coming in all these different ways. But if we really wanted to change things, we would take a radical shift, including, this is the one that nobody wants to do in Congress, public financing of campaigns. The only dollar you get to spend is the dollar the government gives you, and everybody gets the same amount of money every season. That would hinder a lot of folks. And some people will call it a First Amendment problem. Some people will say this, that, and the other. But the bottom line is, as long as you have money in politics, it doesn't matter if it's insider trading, which is one way they're doing it. The other way is by campaign funding. The third way is through these super PACs. And then we haven't even talked about the revolving door that Congress has with industry, that they become lobbyists or they become running corporations or becoming advisors or consultants in corporations. All of that is the same. So what do we do? In my opinion, to make sure I honor Dr. Reynolds, who said, let's make sure we focus on solutions. One, make sure that the people you vote for have a very clear platform against insider trading. Two, make sure that they honor that by bringing to a vote a law that bans insider trading. And three, in my opinion, and there's a ton more things we can do, is make sure that we're tracking these people, because sunlight is the best disinfectant. And the more we know, the more we can call them out for the behavior they're doing right now. Because that stock trading portfolio that's led by Nancy Pelosi, it actually, if you know the different resources that I use, they have a portfolio based on all the insider trading that Congress is doing. Not just Nancy Pelosi, but they're tracking, because they have to make all of their trades public at some point. The problem is that they're making their trades public at a pace slower than they're making the actual trades. So they're giving you a lagging indicator that's behind what they're doing as to how successful they're being. And you find out about a quarter after they did it what's happening. But if you were able to track it real time, man, you would be in dollars and cents.
Rolling.
Rolling.
We wouldn't care who the president is.
I'm trying to tell you, when the Stock Act came up in 2012, Congress they were ready to fight. And so they amended it in 2013 because they had to take away some of the online reporting requirements because it was just onerous. But the problem was that those onerous requirements were keeping them in check, and they didn't like that. You have to outright ban any trading by Congress critters whatsoever. You have to say to them, put your assets in a blind trust to the extent that you can. No, you can't just hand it over to your son, wink, wink. Certain organizations run by the administration, now run by the children of that administration, without any, with the ability to see inside that organization still. But you need to put it into a blind trust where the person managing it has independent
let me get to a couple
authority to do whatever they want to do.
Let me get to a couple other cuts. Squeeze in.
I understand why MAGA Republicans resent federal workers. Federal workers are highly educated Americans who until recently had secure jobs doing what they loved in exchange for a middle-class life and retirement. They were living the American dream we were all promised as kids. Go to school, work hard, and have the American dream. But for millions of Americans, that dream never came true, leaving them bitter and looking for someone to blame. So who's to blame? Just look at this chart here for a second. This is the balance of power of Congress over time. After the Great Depression, from 1934 to 1996, the entire time Trump claims America was great the first time, Democrats controlled the House for 58 out of the 62 years, and the Senate for 52 out of those 62 years. And they used those decades of power and control to build labor unions, to guarantee good pay and benefits, to protect your rights as a worker, and to guarantee a safe workplace. The work Democrats did over those 60 years is the definition of the American dream we have today. And we did it all with a significantly lower economic output, because the wealth created from that economic output was taxed fairly. But Republican billionaires fought it the entire time. And after 60 years of losing, they knew they needed a new war. which is why in the 70s they created the Heritage Foundation, which then propped up an actor named Ronald Reagan. And they gave him a policy playbook called the Mandate for Leadership, which was basically the 1980 version of Project 2025. And Reagan immediately went to work for them with the trickle-down Reaganomics bullshit that destroyed the middle class and exploded the national debt, with the demonization of the federal workforce, and with new culture wars rooted in class, race, gender, orientation, and religion. And they paired this all with a war on information because they knew none of this bullshit would stick to a well-informed electorate. So they came after history books, universities, and news outlets. And they did all of this for one very simple reason. It's cheaper to feed you misinformation than it is to feed you and your family. Now, after 40 years, millions of hungry, misinformed citizens look at immigrants, homeless, veterans, and federal employees as if they're the enemy, all while Republican leaders and their billionaire donors live out their distorted version of the American dream, paid for with the wealth generated by the American working class.
Our watchers out there, our viewers out there, unfortunately, Shelley Winters was tied up, not able to make it today. With this show, our goal is always to give both perspectives, but we can't control some of the issues that happen as far as being able to do the show with all perspectives. So with that said, I was just curious, honestly, Emil, to hear what you and Shelley's response would have been to that. I don't have necessarily an opinion on it because I wanted to learn y'all perspective on what that man just said. So obviously you're the only one with us today. So what do you think about that cut?
Yeah, so there's a way to do what is happening now in a better way. In other words, the federal workforce can change significantly, but it has to be done in a very controlled manner. President Obama, reduced the number of federal workers over his 8 years in office. He was one of the largest cuts before this. And it wasn't bad because it was done in a controlled manner. He was like, we're not efficient enough. We can be more effective. We can maintain this effectiveness and still reduce the amount of people on payrolls. At the same time, he also was leveraging the fact that the economy was growing. So he was like, if I take you off the federal workforce rolls, I am doing my best to create a private workforce, a private employment space that you can transition into that will allow you to maintain. So the federal government has lots of waste. It has lots of people who are doing redundant work or doing things inefficiently or who are just plain bad at their jobs. We've all been to the DMV, and that's like the butt of all jokes. But the problem is that when we demonize federal workers as all bad, then that's where the propaganda comes in. The federal workforce is a highly trained, very dedicated group of people, some of whom are outstanding and could be leaders in their fields if they were in the private sector, and many of whom would be left behind if they weren't in the government sector. So we have the spectrum of the American worker represented in the federal workforce. That's not bad. That's normal. You should expect the same in the private sector, right? What you would want to see is that the government is able to either improve the performance of those at the bottom or get rid of them. And there are procedures for that to happen. Is it slow and is it painful? Absolutely. But at least it's a process that we understand. What you're seeing over the last 40 years is the demonization of the federal government writ large. Since the 80s, President Reagan said the government isn't going to help you with the solution. The government is the problem, right? The government is the problem. So if we get rid of the government, then the government will be out of the way and private sector can do its magic work, which if you are dedicated to that thinking, you would grow the workforce and you would also ensure that there's, the services that Americans need maintained throughout that process. But what you have is people who took that mantra and literally said things like, I want the government so small that I can drown it in a bathtub. That was a mantra over the 90s and early 2000s of many on the conservative side, many on the right. And their point was that the government is too big, too onerous, too many regulations, and is killing me because I can't make enough money fast enough. So the time between the Reagan era, which is the early 80s through the last 40 years into the early 2020s, you saw the American worker progressively get more and more productive, and you saw the wages of the American worker stagnate. So there's this gap between how much money a worker earns for a company and how much money a worker earns for themselves. That gap, You can actually do the math, and that gap is going back into the hands of the richest 1 to 10% of Americans. That money that they earned through higher productivity, not getting paid based more than what inflation was, that delta is in the hands of private individuals right now. So what you're seeing is the effect of that, which is, oh, these private individuals, they want more money than they already have. So they have some of the lowest tax rates in the major economies across the world. They have more money than they've ever had in the history of money. And they're saying, we want more. And the source to more isn't the worker. They've been squeezing out of the worker all the productivity they can. So they go to the federal workforce and say, if the federal government is smaller, then we can have more money, right? It's not about efficiency. It's not about effectiveness. It's about money. It's about wealth and power. And the fact that Elon Musk and Doge are aiming at Congress, here's what they're not aiming at. They're not aiming at the people who just made billions of dollars on tariff trades. They're not aiming at the ability to manage taxes for the littlest of Americans. In other words, if you want to make more money bring more money into the federal coffers, you could just tax the rich a little bit more, not even 1% more, and you would have a lot more money. There's ways that Doge could be making some changes on behalf of the smallest Americans, but they're not.
Yeah, I heard Sam Cedar, guy. I think he's out of New England. I think it was him that said this, but he just said if they were able to get the taxes that are actually owed because of kind of how the dodging is. I'm talking about this what's actually owed. It would cover some of the areas that we're most complaining about. I forgot the numbers. I'm not going to make the numbers up. I might find that cut for next show. But I am going to go into extra innings if you got about 10 minutes.
I do have time.
Okay, I just want to check. So I call this part extra innings, y'all, where we just go a few more cuts and go a little over an hour. So I'm going to play a couple of cuts and get Emil's perspective on these cuts.
I've got to get into some high-profile Democrats that are speaking out against the Trump administration. I'll start with former Vice President Kamala Harris, who addressed a women's summit yesterday in California. The former Democratic presidential nominee, who lost to Trump in November, said the president's moves since he returned to office were largely predictable. Here's more of her remarks last night at the Leading Women Defined Summit. Quote, "There were many things we knew were going to happen. I'm not going to say, I told you so. We are seeing people stay quiet. We are seeing organizations stay quiet. We are seeing capitulating to clearly unconstitutional threats. Courage is contagious," end quote. Meanwhile, President Barack Obama also had words for the administration yesterday. Obama said that he doesn't think Trump's new tariff announcement is going to be good for America. He also added that his larger concern is what he described as the White House's infringement of rights, end quote. Tell us something we don't know. See, the problem is we always knew that. But no thanks to y'all as Democrats. Yes, you did say he was a threat to democracy. Yes, you did say, don't think that what he says is true, that it's going to happen. Yes, you did say, beware, beware, beware. You told us those things. But you still lived life allowing cancer culture and identity politics to be pervasive throughout our society. Y'all did that as Democrats. And then when people tried to tell y'all, and instead we tried to get y'all to focus on the concerns of the American people, the cost of living, inflation, etc., the borders, not open borders. Stop denying that 12 million plus people crossed the border illegally. When we told you to stop doing that, when we told you to pay attention to the price of eggs and cheese and bread and gas and stuff like that, even though you touched on it, the focus was making sure that you touched on the moral fabric and the moral compass of individuals to guilt us into voting for the Democratic Party. Meanwhile, Donald Trump and the folks on the GOP side spoke plain English. And I'm going to say something that isn't popular to say, but you know something, the Democrats need to hear this. Y'all are very, very fond of talking about how Donald Trump lies. Some of the things that have made people uncomfortable about Donald Trump, I got news for you. He hasn't lied. Didn't he say tariffs was what he was going to live by? Did he not say that he was going to close those damn borders? I believe he said that. Did he not say that he was going to address crime in our streets and things were going to get very, very bad for lawless individuals out there? Did he not provide indications that he could give a damn about the civil rights and the human rights of individuals that were considered lawless? Did he not say, or at least indicate, that come hella high water, the culture that we were living in, we were going to dial that back? Did he not talk about the LGBTQ plus community, specifically as it pertains to transgenders and athletes not being allowed to transition from male to female and be able to compete in women's sports? Did he not say these things? Yes, he did. Why am I bringing all of that up? Because for better or worse, most American people feel we know him.
Your thoughts, Emil? I'll just say this very briefly. I'll say a scathing assessment. That's kind of the word I would use for what Stephen A. had to say.
Yep.
I would also willing to say point on, and I agree with him. That's what I'll say in reference to what he had to say. And I think what he just said is part of the reason. I don't know if you're familiar, but they just had MMA, one of their biggest fights or whatever, and President Trump showed up to the loudest cheers ever. And I'm just highlighting because I'm highlighting that what Stephen A. highlighted at the end, that he said he's going to do these things. There are plenty of Americans that are in full lockstep in agreement with how the president is moving. And I'm not judging that. I'm just highlighting for anyone who thinks like sometimes going, look at what they're getting or how do they feel now? Well, I see him coming out to the biggest cheers ever at a UFC fight. So for many, it's what Stephen A. said at the end. We know him and he's giving us what he said. And you and I have ridiculed even the Democrats for often not living up to what they say. So in that sense, there are plenty of Americans that are still loving and proud of the job that Donald Trump is doing. That's what I'll add to what Stephen A. had to say. What are your thoughts, Keith, brother?
MMA fans like Trump and cheered for him. Coachella fans booed him. So yes, he's going to go where he's most loved. If he had been at Coachella, he would not have felt that love. And I say that because Stephen A. is 100% right in so many of his assessments as to what the Democrats are doing wrong. You've heard me complain about the Democrats because they're not a robust opposition right now, and they're lost in the sauce. I don't know how else to explain it to them, but to say, are you listening? Stephen A. calls you out. You don't have to be draconian to close the border. In fact, I don't even like the concept of closing the border. I like the concept of controlling the border, meaning everybody who comes in does so through a process. That process needs to be led properly. There was a great bill, very conservative bill that the Senate, that had gotten into the Senate, that the House had passed, that would have helped with this border mess. And the president said no. He was a candidate at the time, and he said, no, I want to control the border through the processes that I'm going to control once I win. They haven't reintroduced that bill yet. So what does that tell you? It tells you that there's something amiss, and that's something that the Democrats have not locked onto yet. They haven't really found their stride in providing a contrast for people to see daily protection, daily gains, daily opportunities. They're not saying what needs to be said. They're in opposition, but what are they for? And what Stephen A. said very clearly in his segment that you showed is that President Trump is showing you what he's for. Whether it's a violation of rights or not, doesn't matter. He's for this. Whether it is bad for business or not, he's for this. He's making it very plain what he's for. And what he's not doing is he's not telling you what he's against as his primary platform. Mm-hmm. His primary platform is very affirmative. I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. And President Trump, if he does nothing, he honors his promises. Yes, he lies about everything, But when it comes to his promises, you will see him follow dot for dot what he said he would do. Whether or not it is unconstitutional is irrelevant. He's doing it. And what the Democrats haven't done is message what they're going to do that maintains the rule of law, that maintains order and law and order in this country, that maintains the ability for people to see their rights upheld and honored, which is a tradition that America should be most concerned about. More than borders, more than crime, it should be most concerned about rights. But is it? No. Why? Because the guy who's violating the rights is able to get standing ovations, and the people who are trying to uphold the rights are being shunned. So it ain't about rights, it's about performance. And once the Democrats figure this out, they can do both and message it properly.
I'm gonna close with that. I was gonna play one more cut from some Obama recent statements, but I know Shelley had a lot to say on that, so hopefully we can get him back on the show.
I would love for Shelley to comment on that.
Yeah, so I'll save that cut for when we get him back on the show. So that's our extra innings for the day, our extra 10 minutes. At the end of the day, if you're tired of the propaganda, listen to us. If you just tuned in later, go back and watch the excellent portion of this show with Dr. Cher'Don Reynolds.
Shout out to Dr. Reynolds, man. She came with us with the fires, just spitting all kind of kerosene, gasoline. Oh man, I love that segment. Thank you, Dr. Reynolds. You made our show today.
Absolutely. If you're tired of the propaganda, listen to us. See y'all next time. Please share and share this show and subscribe to our channel. Till next pop-up. See you next time. All right.
Peace.
What's happening with my button here? I'm trying to close out and it ain't let me hit it. Maybe I hit it wrong. Let me try it again. All right, here we go. I got it.
All right, bro. I'm out.
All right, later.